The newspapers now on the programme. Solange Mougin is joining us. Solange is starting off with the tributes this past weekend. This is to mark the 60th anniversary of the deadly 1961 crackdown against Algerian protesters. Solange.
Yeah, and for Le Figaro, the conservative paper, Emmanuel Macron's calling of the massacre an unforgivable crime is one more positive step in a larger plan of reconciliation. But the praise pretty much stops there. For the conservative paper, Macron took a risk here of not seeming firm in regard to France's current relationship with Algeria, and a currently tense relationship. And the paper actually wonders if such moves really are beneficial. For Le Figaro, it will not change much. And such grumblings, you can see them as well in the left-leaning press. For L'Humanité, Macron did not go far enough. He did not apologize or acknowledge the state, the government's responsibility, but instead heaped blame on the police commander at the time who ordered the murder of Algerian protesters and the throwing of their bodies into the Seine.
What about the Algerian papers and Solange? How are they reading this?
Well, for the Algerian paper Al Moudjahideen, it headlines with the words, quote, "Pity the martyrs," referring to the still unknown number of Algerians who were shot and thrown into the river. For El Watan, in turn, they published horrifying images from the war. You see them there with the words of Algeria's president saying, quote, "These crimes are engraved in our collective memory," end quote. Now, the paper, like its French counterpart, L'Humanité, regrets that Macron did not evoke crimes committed by the state. And El Watan chose to sort of sum up this issue with a drawing by Hick entitled "Macron Denounces Without Taking Responsibility." And in it, an Algerian is standing on a bridge, much like the one that Algerians were thrown from in Paris, and asks the French president why he didn't want to, quote, "get his feet wet."
Let's go to the UK for this next story. The British press is widely covering the stabbing of the British lawmaker David Amess, who was killed while visiting constituents on Friday.
Yeah, the tragedy remains pretty much on all of the front pages of the UK press today. And the Eye has focused today on the Amess's families, asking people to show kindness and love rather than having the murder sort of create divisions between people. And now, an investigation is still ongoing into the assailant's motives, but regardless of what's found, the Financial Times says the murder and that of another lawmaker, Joe Cox, in 2016, both murders raise questions about how to protect MPs, with the government now considering police protection for them. Now, it means, as the illustrator Brian Adcock notes in a cartoon entitled "Louder Than Ever," that Big Ben is sounding the alarm with a big bong on the state of the UK's democracy and the state of it if lawmakers cannot even safely go out and meet the people that they represent.
US, this next story, the American press is discussing the demands that West Virginia Senator Joe Manchin is making on the Biden administration.
Yeah, in addition to drawing red lines in regard to Biden's plans on childcare and on economic initiatives, the Washington Post, it tells us that Joe Manchin, who is from the US state of West Virginia, coal country, he's balked about the White House's climate agenda. Manchin, it's important to remind people that Manchin has much of a kingmaker role in the Senate because he is a needed deciding vote to get legislation passed. And as the Post tells us, he has said no to Biden's clean electricity program. And the conservative paper, the Washington Times, well, they tell us that this jeopardizes the White House's pledge to halve emissions by 2030, which has sent, in their view, Democrats scrambling. Now, the issue has created much ire in Washington on both sides of the aisle. Bernie Sanders, he penned an op-ed a few days ago in the Charleston Gazette-Mail, making a plea to West Virginians to back the legislation, to which Manchin hit back, saying Sanders was, quote, another out-of-stater trying to tell West Virginians what was best for them. Now, Manchin-Sanders feud aside, the New York Times tells us that on the environmental level, West Virginians already are in deep water, with recent data showing that no other state in the U.S. is exposed to flood damage because of climate change more than West Virginia.
Time for those bizarre stories that Solange always seems to manage to dig out for us. She's found a couple of articles about of mice and men
Yes, and I am not talking about the Steinbeck novel, but instead about hiding what you are really doing. Let's start with the men, then we'll get to the mice. The FT tells us that one of Spain's hot literary stars, Carmen Mola, who was until now thought to be sort of a famed anonymous university and female university professor, was actually turned out to be 3 men. They broke the news of their real identity when at the award ceremony this woman's name was called, and instead 3 men stood up and explained that it's them. They got to collect a €1 million prize. Now to the mice, uncovering an unexpected loot. It also happened to Italian police. They, as the Daily Star tells us, were raiding a cannabis farm when investigators found hundreds of dormice. They are a protected species in Italy, and the rodents were actually being raised to be, get this, hold your stomachs tight, to be eaten as a delicacy for the mafia. For the mafia, it is a delicacy. They serve them at reconciliatory dinners. They're baked.
Lovely.
Scales are included. So again, money leading us to some strange habits between mice and men.
Mouse pizza sounds very, very nice. Solange will be making it for dinner for her children later on.
No way.
Solange Mougin with the papers on France 24.